Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This is the Study in Wales webinar, info and updates for parents specifically, but if you are an advisor, if you are a student, you're going to get some useful information from this session. But we figured it would be quite useful to have a session with all the questions that we get asked as advisors and admissions officers for students coming from the US into the UK. This is worldwide, however, so if you're not from the US, that's okay too. I hope this is useful for you. I'm Maggie Park. I'm the director, the manager of the United States interactions for Study in Wales, and I'm also joined today by Nick Brabin. Do you want to introduce yourself, Nick?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Nick Brabin from Cardiff Metropolitan University here in the capital city in Wales, Cardiff. My role is a regional manager and I cover the Americas and Africa. So, you know, small places around the globe, but dealing with everything from inquiries, applications and admissions to the university from those regions. So essentially your students' applications or your child's application will probably come past my eyes and my hands during the process if they were interested in Cardiff Met.
And at the end of this, we'll have a slide with all of the US champions contact details on it, because each of our 8 Welsh campuses does have a US champion. So it'll be somebody like Nick that would be able to answer questions about your application, about the process, about living, about traveling, any of those things. So we do pride ourselves in Wales for having that one-to-one relationship with our applicants. So you will be able to reach out to them and have that connection. Nick has the accent, so I apologize that I don't have it. I always have to start that way because I think people are disappointed when I start talking. But I am from the United States myself. I'm from Pennsylvania. I am actually the daughter of a guidance counselor, so lived through this. But I did this myself. I came over to Wales to study abroad for just a semester when I was an undergrad. I didn't know this was an option for a bachelor's when I was in high school. I absolutely loved it. I almost transferred to finish my undergrad over here, but I came back for my master's and I stayed for a PhD, and I've now lived here for 16 years and I have a husband and a house and a kid on the way. So I think I'm in it to win it. So some of us hook, line and sinker get stuck here, but I do want you to know that just I have a lot of personal experience with this as well as professional experience with this. And Nick as well is an alumni of a Welsh institution and now works within the system. So hopefully we can cover a lot of ground for you. As we go through this presentation, if you do have questions that come up, please do pop them into the chat. We'll try to keep an eye on it during the presentation, but we'll definitely answer everything at the end. Our goal for this entire session is to definitely be less than an hour. Pretty much all of our webinars have been 30 to 45 minutes. And our goal will be to just give you the basic information, the most useful information as clearly as we can. We're going to try to not drown you in detail. If you need detail, reach out to us. We will very happily set up another Zoom with you. We also do a Zoom drop-in every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, called Wales Wednesday. So if you want to join any of those, you can always just drop in and ask a quick question or have a chat. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to give you a general overview about studying in Wales, just how it works, how it's structured, what we look for in an applicant. And then we'll go through this list, believe it or not, quickly, of the questions and the details that we get asked about most often by parents. Okay, so first of all, this is where we are. We're that red bit on the map. Wales, think of it like a state. You know, we've got 4 states that make up the UK: Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales. So Wales is its own independent nation, but it is part of the United Kingdom as a country. So we do have devolved government. Education is run by Wales for Wales. It's a very small country. It's about the size of Vermont. And I think people forget that the whole country is kind of like the size of New England. You can get from top to bottom in about 8 or 9 hours. I live in North Wales, the very north tip of Wales, and I'm in London every Monday during normal times, not during COVID times. I'm in London every Monday teaching a class. It's 3 hours on a direct train, so I work on the way down, I teach my class, I hang out for a few hours, usually get a nice meal, and then come home. So you can do all of that while living in Wales, but the access is really lovely, and it's about 70% cheaper living where I live than it is living in London. So, and I can see the ocean and the mountains out my window, so it's pretty great. It's about an hour and a half to Manchester, about an hour and a half to Dublin on the ferry. From South Wales, it's about 2 hours to London. It's about 2 hours to Europe on a plane, anywhere in mainland Europe, and it's about 7 hours to the East Coast on a plane and about 10 hours to the West Coast. These are generally direct flights from Manchester, Birmingham, or London. And we do run airport pickup services and things like that. So we meet the students at the airport, bring them back to campus. And that 7-hour flight, I think that sounds incredible to some people, or 10 hours if you're on the West Coast, but I break it down into Netflix marathons. Like that's like 5 episodes. That's like 3 movies. And once you do it a couple times, it's really nothing. I used to drive 6 hours from Pennsylvania to Virginia for college, and now I fly 7 hours. And I ended up saving about $35,000 a year. So that was pretty easy to justify that kind of flight for that. So I just want to give you some of that context so you start wrapping your head around the idea. Okay, it's not that far away. This is doable, and travel is fantastic. You also don't need a car. I lived here for 9 years without a car. Public transportation is fantastic and really affordable. This is kind of the main gist of the things that are helpful, that's helpful for you to know when considering a Welsh degree. The main things are that it is a beautiful location. They're shorter, more focused degrees, and incredibly affordable. So location I'll get into, you'll see some pretty pictures. A degree from Wales is equal to a US degree. The bachelor's degree, the master's, the PhD, all of them will transfer back completely equal to a US degree. The things that can be tricky are certifications. So it's the same as if you were a teacher in California and you wanted to move to Texas, you need to get recertified in that state. Sometimes it's exactly equal, it's accepted, no problem. Other times they want you to go back to school for 2 years. So it is good to know that before you enroll in that program. So just check with your US champion before you enroll. You can check, I mean, I guess after application, but definitely check before you accept an offer. But that's just the certification, the bachelor's degree, the master's, all of that will transfer back, no problem. The reason that it's shorter is because we don't do gen eds in the UK. When you're applying to a university, you're actually applying to a specific major, which we call courses. You're applying to a specific course, and you do that for 3 years. So you'll still take intro to writing and intro to research and things like that, but within your department. So you don't have a science requirement or foreign language requirement or a gym requirement, because I had a gym requirement as an undergrad, and I figured out that I had to pay $5,300 for my 1 credit course in yoga. Like, that's a bit mad. You can take yoga, but it'll be free or very, very cheap. And will have nothing to do with your course GPA, your success as a student at that university. All of your degree is focused on your subject matter. So you will just study that subject. If you want to keep up other interests, you usually can sit in on any other class you want. We definitely offer language classes for free. I sat in on music classes just because I was interested. So you can definitely still keep those things alive, but your degree is your degree. So it's quite set what you study and very focused on that subject material. Now, that being said, sometimes that throws people. You don't have to know what you want to do with your life. You just have to know what you want to study. We'll help you with the jobs, employability, options out there, internships, which we'll talk about in a bit, all that stuff. You just need to know what you want to study. If you start with like clinical psychology and you want to switch to neuropsychology, pretty straightforward. You're pretty much all taking the same stuff that first year, so it's pretty easy to go within departments. If you start with clinical psychology and you want to switch to ocean sciences, it's a little tricky. You might have to start that over again. So it is worth knowing what you want to do study-wise. And we do have a lot of students that will do a year at community college or something like that and then come to us. So anyway, we can get into those details. Main reason I stuck around was cost. The schools I looked at in the United States were between $35,000 and $55,000 a year. The school I ended up at was $11,000 a year. After scholarships, I was paying $7,000 a year. And for that, I filled out the FAFSA because a number of our institutions are FAFSA certified. And I got US federal loans to pay for my degree over here. So I am in debt, but I was in debt about $30,000 at the end of a PhD. I'm okay with that. That was less than 1 year than what I was going to pay in the US. And I basically live in Narnia, so it's great. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Entry requirements, this will be dependent upon each university, what the numbers they're looking for, but we're all looking for the same criteria. We're basically looking for your grades. We want to see the higher level classes, honors, AP, IB. We want to see A's and B's generally. Most of us are looking for a 3.0 and above. It will depend which course you want to do. SAT or ACT, we are test flexible, especially in these post-COVID times when it's very difficult to get a test. If you've sat them, we would like to see them, but if you haven't, just reach out to your US manager and have that conversation. Same with AP subject tests, which don't exist anymore, but if you've already taken them, we'd like to see them. We'll also look at community college classes. Basically, we need evidence that you can handle that upper level education with us. So if you have a really strong GPA and you've taken a community college class in intro to psych, and statistics or something like that, and you want to study psychology, then that's what we would look for to come study with us. And that's definitely to make sure that you are capable, but it's really to make sure that you're going to succeed. We want to make sure that you are as prepped as our British students are to come into that program. If there's any questions about that, again, reach out to us because we're well versed in this. The main thing with the Welsh campuses is our transparency with admissions. So you could literally send us your transcript and say, I want to study this subject. And I'd be able to tell you, yes, you'll be accepted, or no, you won't because I need to see XYZ. So if you're a freshman, a sophomore, or a junior, you still have time for this as well. So if you could email a Welsh institution and say, I want to study psychology, here's my transcript, I would say, great, but I really need to see a stats class or an intro to psych class at the community college level, or an AP exam in this subject matter. See if you can sit that, and we can have that conversation so you're prepared for your senior year. Hope that makes sense. Okay, sorry, I also have to apologize, I'm a little out of breath. I'm 8 months pregnant, so my lung capacity, a little diminished. I'll just do a couple pictures of Wales so you can just see some beautiful stuff. We do have, you know, the capital cities, Cardiff, proper metropolitan city, but on a kind of a micro scale. It's about 350,000 people. Feels like London, but you can walk across it in 45 minutes. We've got theaters, we've got sports, we've got the Bay. The seat of Parliament is there, called the Senedd, which is the Welsh Parliament. BBC has major studios here, all the shops and concerts and all that kind of stuff that you would want in the capital city. And if you do want to go to London, it's 2 hours on a direct train, and they leave pretty much every hour. We have more castles per square mile than anywhere in Europe. And that was a huge selling point for me. I wanted to feel like I was overseas. I wanted this magical Celtic adventure. And some of my classes were actually offered in a castle. And if they weren't, I took my books and went and sat in a castle to read. So this is on your doorstep, just pretty magical. We also have 25% of the country covered in national parks. It is a stunning place to live. It's kind of a hidden gem. We definitely have tourists, but it's not like, you know, troping around the high street of Edinburgh in the middle of August. It's much quieter and a bit more rugged and private and just really lovely. So this is one of the sites up in North Wales that our students would have access to, but pretty much every campus is within 20 minutes of either a national park or an area of outstanding natural beauty. We have a lot of buildings that look like Hogwarts. This is one at Aberystwyth University. This one's on the seafront as well. Our universities are really friendly. We're known for our warm Welsh welcome, which sounds so cliche, but it's very true. It's a very safe place to live. We have a really low crime rate, all those details that you would hope to see from a campus where your child is. We also have excellent student support and resources. So I'll talk about housing in a second, but student support, I think Nick is going to talk about it a little bit more in detail as well a bit later, but the main thing is to just know how much is available to you. Coming up through the US system, it was definitely there, you could access it, but there was almost a stigma to it, and there's so not in the UK. It's very much like, let us know if you have a disability, we'll help you out, you know, declare it on your application form. We'll set that before you get here and make sure you've got everything you need. And if you need anything, just give us a shout. It's very like just part of the culture. And I know in some US institutions, you know, advisors will discourage you from disclosing that on your application because it could hurt your chances of admission. We'd never heard that before until last year, and we're appalled because we're the exact opposite. Declare your disability so we can prepare for it and make sure that we're ready to assist you. So if you do have any kind of concerns in that realm, again, reach out to your US champion and they can set up a learning plan before you get there. We had staff at my old university training on new software for a blind student. Our international support office assisted him to come over early with a different visa, so he and his guide dog could learn the route from his dorm to his academic buildings. So there's some things that can be set up to just kind of help you prepare for that. Give yourself that option. We'd love to help you out. We also have all the standard support that you would expect. Mental support, learning support, advice on getting a job, advice on opening a bank account, all those little details of like, how do I do this? We do it here, very normal for us. It's just the first time for you. So when you first arrive, we'll pick you up at the airport. We'll bring you back to the dorms. We'll probably even carry your suitcase upstairs. We'll probably have some walking tours led by Americans or your home country, so you can point out where the peanut butter is and where the goldfish crackers are, you know, the things that you really care about when you're a bit homesick. Tell you which phone plan is best to call back home. And then for the first 3 days, it's usually just international students, and they run sessions on how to open a bank account, how to get a doctor's appointment, how to get a job, all those things that you're like, how do I do this? We'll help you. So all you really have to be concerned about is if you like the location, if you like the program, apply. And once accepted, we'll help you with the rest of the steps. I'm going to pause there. Oh, clubs and societies. All of our campuses also have clubs and societies, American style. 250 to 300 clubs per university generally. So any sport that you're interested, any activity you want to continue, volunteering, cultural, religious, whatever, those options are pretty much on your campus. If they're not, you can start one. I think it takes 8 people to start a club, so you can always start one on your campus.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that as well, because obviously sometimes we're asked about if you do sports and the level of sports you have in those clubs, and we always say there's something for everybody. So we're quite a sports focused university as well. We have the Archers. We recruit a lot of students from the US into some of our teams like rugby and women's soccer and things like that. And you can play at varying levels. You might be playing to quite a high standard if you're a very elite player, or if you just want to kick around in a field and play a lower level and maybe not in the big competitions of the university, there will be that level of club for you as well. So having been a president of a students' union, having done clubs and societies, even when I was a student, if it's not there, like Maggie said, we would back a student to set one up, and we definitely want some more US societies or US related societies, North American, basically more international clubs for sure.
Definitely. So it is quite different than some of the US schools. I went to a D3 school as an undergrad, and I was a rower and was expecting that kind of ability here, and it was there. It was way better than my D3 school, but alongside the really elite level was also people that had never touched a boat in their lives. So I got to actually coach a bit as well. So it was just kind of nice to find that balance, that you can still maintain that elite athlete element. There are some scholarships for sports, but it's going to be a different culture than what we've seen in the US. There's not these full rides and 110,000 people stadium, and it's just a little bit different, but we've got everything you need, which is key. And then I think this is my last slide for a bit. So accommodation is obviously a question we get asked a lot. Yes, you will have a place to live. Most of our campuses will have on-campus accommodation exactly like you would expect at a standard US institution. They look like this. This is actually the one I lived in for 4 years. I was an RA for 4 years. And the main difference is that it's single accommodation. We don't share in the UK. You get your own bedroom and your own bathroom, and then you share a kitchen with 6 or 7 people generally. Some campuses will have apartment style living, so you could have your own room, but maybe a shared bathroom between 2 or 3 people, and like a shared common space between 4 or 5 people. Some campuses have townhouses where it's 10 people in a townhouse, but you have your own bedroom. Excuse me. And some places have studio apartments, so it's all self-contained. There are a couple campuses that do not have on-campus accommodation, but they work really closely with private providers and would, it's approved by the university. They help facilitate the process, and they would find you a student accommodation. So it's just like a dorm, it's just run by a different company. And they're all standard, what you would expect. There's, food facilities on site, there's a gym, there's mail rooms, there's a pub, there's 24/7 security. All those things that you would need living there. I suppose there's a few differences, like the dining facilities is definitely worth noting that there's pretty much never meal plans in the UK. I don't know of any campus that has a meal plan, but that's a good thing. All of our campuses, you pay for what you eat. It's not getting tied into these really expensive meal plans. Like I remember my undergrad days, and I'm old, so it's probably gone up since then. But I remember my undergrad days, you paid like $10 for breakfast, $15 for lunch, and like $20 for dinner. So by not having that tied in, you probably save between $3,000 and $5,000 a year just by paying for what you're eating. And it's really well organized. So most of the campuses will have an app on your phone, and you just tap your phone and it's connected to a credit card, and that pays for your meal. So every academic building, 5 or 6 cafes on campus, there will be food outlets. There's just not a meal plan. So I think that always throws Americans a little bit, like, wait, there's no meal plan. There's loads of food and it will save you money. Yeah, I think I'll pause there. So that's the main thing with accommodation. It's there. You have an RA, you have, resident director, you've got 24/7 security access, a pastoral support team if you're homesick, if you don't know how to change your light bulb, if you lost your phone, whatever the situation, you have this support network that can help you. Most of our students do stay on campus for the first year. It's such a great way to like find your community as well. And then if you want to stay for years 2 and 3, you usually can on most campuses. But if you want to go off campus, we'll also have private accommodation offices that can look at contracts and things like that to make sure they're approved landlords and you're not being swindled or anything like that. Okay, so I will pause and pass over to Nick.
Thanks very much. So I've been asked a lot by parents lately, what have universities been doing throughout this pandemic? Now, you probably look at some media and universities are closed, everything's shut down. But trust me when I say on the 17th of March, 2020, we weren't shutting down. We were just preparing to work differently. And universities have been operating in the entire time since we closed our doors on campus on the 17th of March. Universities have worked towards very dynamic, blended, hybrid learning, all these terms that we've all learned the meaning of over the last year or so. And I just thought it was really important to kind of touch on the kind of things that we've done in the UK, around the UK as a whole, amongst all the universities here, and in Wales as well in particular. So the good news is we are out of the majority out of our lockdowns that we've been going through. So freedom to roam, huzzah! It's not a bad thing to be locked in Wales, but it's a bit weird when you've only got to walk across a road to get into England. So it has been a bit unusual that we've tried to stay in Wales and not travel across the border if you can't, if you can help it. What we've put in place is obviously all the social distancing measures. And when you walk around any of our university campuses, you'll see that we've taken that quite seriously, even with very few students or staff on campuses during this time. So you will see one-way systems, clear indications that you need to be wearing a mask, stations for hand gel, all the hygienic kind of messaging that you would expect during this pandemic. We've actually been increasing the amount of outdoor space available to students to socially distance and have food and facilities outside. So if anything, our campus is becoming a lot nicer with some fabulous seating outside. They've even taken away some car parking spaces to make more seating areas around the university during this time. So if anything, there's probably some good positives of less cars on campus. Around us, essential shops and non-essential shops, they've been open and closed. So essential shops have always been open, non-essential have started to open. And of course, that means we are starting to be more out and about. What we've done, particularly through our education, is where possible, we've allowed face-to-face teaching for those courses where you really couldn't just do it virtually. So, from the sciences, you can't really train a doctor in a virtual session, I think, particularly if you're doing dissection, that might have been a bit tricky. So, of course, we've tried to get as many of our courses that need to be face-to-face on campus over those that perhaps like in more generic subjects where they can actually do a little bit more online learning. And we're now at this stage where we're trying to plan for September. If I could trouble you for the next slide, please, Maggie. Of course, no one knows what September is going to look like. We look into the horizon and we all want the answer what COVID is going to look like come September. So what we're trying to do is a series of plans, whether it be in the current states of 2 meter social distancing, right through to life is as normal as it can be, and we're back to full-on face-to-face teaching. It does mean that information coming across the students isn't as slick and as quick as it used to be, but now we seem to be pretty good at doing this. We did it in the middle of a pandemic, all very quickly, whilst we had students here, students come in. So now it allows us a bit more time to think about the various options available. Something we did in September, of course, around universities was a kind of roll-in start to allow students time to arrive into the UK, perhaps go into self-isolation accommodation, so they could actually interact with their classes whilst they were self-isolating. And then once they were out of self-isolation, try and get some normality back. And in Wales, of course, we had our own local lockdowns, as we called them. So, you know, again, contact with campus was a little bit limited. So we're kind of putting in plans that has like your A, your B, maybe Z scenarios just to get ready for that, in the hope that, you know, we will have a plan for everyone. And across Wales, we're looking more at the self-isolation accommodation and making plans to have that in place should we require it. Across the UK, universities are talking with government, also to kind of make sure that students can arrive and go into this kind of accommodation rather than the more public, kind of more expensive accommodation of hotels as soon as they land in the UK. So there's a lot of work going on for planning for all eventualities as best as we can in this kind of current situation. But during this time, and as part of the process of students coming here, things like our National Health Service has been available to our students. And we are now at a phase in Wales that the under 30-year-olds are starting to be called for their vaccinations. My university only today tweeted a shout out to students to say, if you're 18 to 29, get calling the NHS and booking your vaccine. And it's kind of nice to see some of my younger staff actually doing the same thing and booking theirs. So we're at a point in Wales, we're actually ahead of most of the vaccinations. We're flying through our age ranges. I'm waiting for my second, so then that shows my age. But again, it shows that it's been accessible to our students as well. NHS, once you make that slight payment in the visa process, you pay a contribution to it. It does mean your health services are free here in Wales. That means you can go to your general practitioner or your GP doctor, get a prescription if you need an antibiotic, and it's absolutely free here in Wales. So I thought that was quite important to touch on as well. All you need to know as a counsellor or parent is we are constantly looking to work as safely as possible, and students are at the forefront of our minds. So we are constantly in contact with Welsh Government and all the various government policies. We're also connected with Public Health Wales and various bodies to ensure that we're following the most up-to-date guidelines to make it as safe as possible for our students to be here. Next slide, please.
I just want to reiterate that one point about the NHS, because I think that always throws people a little bit. Yes, you will absolutely have access to free healthcare. It's part of the visa process, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's a copay that you pay up front at the very beginning, and then you are covered for the duration of your course, and everything is free. So all of your appointments, if you have to, God forbid, go in an ambulance, need surgery, any prescriptions, and a lot of this can be set up with your international support office before you come over as well. So if you're on medication now, we can set up health plans to make sure there's a continuation and no gap when you come over here. Many of our students do hang on to their US insurance if it's easy to stay under your parents' insurance plan, things like that. Many of our US students do that, so they have coverage when they go back to the US, or sometimes parents are more comfortable bringing them back for that care. To each their own. But the student is completely covered. I never had any US coverage. I would just have travel insurance living here for when I did leave the UK, but the NHS has been a godsend since I've lived here. So I'm a fan. There's pros and cons to all systems, obviously, but just know that you do have access to it.
Awesome, thanks. Next slide, please, yeah. So we're just going to touch on very quickly the ways you can apply to universities here in Wales. We have technically 3 routes. You've got the UCAS system, which is common for undergraduate studies. Maggie prompted me to say it's a bit like the European Common App. So it's one application, 5 choices for most courses, unless you do something like medicine or dentistry, where you can only pick 4 universities and a backup choice. It does save a lot of time if a student is looking to apply for a course across a number of different places. It just makes it a lot simpler. My top tip, don't say the university name in the personal statement. We all read them, And we all get a little sad when it doesn't mention our own university. So I always say, make sure you leave that out. And unlike things like in the Common App, the essay is more around why you want to study this course. You can apply direct to a number of universities. So if you have, I only want to go to Cardiff Met, I only want to go to Swansea, there will be routes that you can apply just to that university without going through UCAS. And a number of us are Common App champions. I like saying champions because I think it's a really good thing to say. So we're proud to be one at Cardiff Met, and we have a couple of other colleagues who have also signed up to Common App. So again, it's just trying to find ways of reaching our students in the US, allowing them different ways they can reach out and apply to us. Next one, please. The good thing about some of these is you can actually use and abuse some of the resources. So UCAS has a fantastic search function, which means you can look up the course that you want to study and then find out who actually provides that program. So if you type in business, you're probably going to get 120 plus universities pop up, and they're all alphabetical, not ranked. So sadly, you'll have to trawl through a lot of information. But then for your more unique programs like medicine or dentistry, law, it will narrow down the search for you. There are some great helpful hints and tips about how to write personal statements, some important information you might need about the application process as well. So it's a really good resource, whether you're a parent, a counsellor, a teacher, or a student looking to apply. If anybody's considering medicine or dentistry, that's a tough one, and limited places, very competitive, but you're all probably used to hearing that. For medicine, there's a different deadline, which is the 15th of October. So you have to get your 4 choices in for medicine or dentistry before the 15th of October in the year that you're completing your studies.
And we have a whole other webinar on those subjects. So that's a just reach out, and it's on our YouTube channel, but there's a whole other webinar on professional subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's plenty of details that we've provided over these things. Everything else is open for international students in UCAS until the 30th of June. So it's a rolling admission for pretty much every other program in that system, and applications can keep continuing to come through to us up until the end of June. And the must-have is the personal statement, as I mentioned. Focus on the subject, why you want to do this course, what skills you bring to it. And there will always be these helpful hints and tips about writing personal statements available at universities. The reference is normally an academic reference, perhaps a counsellor or even a subject tutor. And, you know, we're particularly looking to make sure this student is in good academic standing. Yes, they may do every sport, they may be the top at everything else that they do, but the most important thing is, will they have the subject knowledge to come and study with us? Next slide, please. Direct apps, the benefit, they're free, they're online, they're usually very easy to navigate, they're available for undergrads and postgrads. So sometimes these systems are much easier when you know exactly who you want to go to. So we encourage a direct application just when you know, I only want to go to X university. We don't normally encourage anyone to apply through a direct +5 UCAS +20 Common App, because at some point we find out you applied through UCAS and we have to fix it, and it's a lot of paperwork. So the idea of the direct application is just to make it easier and perhaps avoid any cost going through the UCAS kind of process. Rolling admission, so we sometimes have a longer rolling process and deadline for those direct applications. It normally allows us to take you into August for your final decision to come. So we can make decisions on people quite late in the cycle. So I have had a student apply in August and arrive 2 weeks later in September. It's very doable, just have to be organised. And yeah, do not use it as an additional to outside of UCAS. Next one, please. Of course, our decisions are always based on academic criteria and the personal statement. It's looking at, does this student have the right subjects to go into this course? So if you're going into a science course, we kind of want you to have science. If it's a general subject like a business, there's less emphasis on the subjects you need to have previously studied. So again, it's always about getting the research done before students apply. Probably the kind of thing you want us to nag at your kids or to your students if you're a counsellor. There are some courses that will require interview, some a portfolio. There may be additional assessments you need to do, like a written piece of work if it's creative writing. You could even do an audition for something like music or drama. Again, we will guide you through those things. If there's anything missing, our admissions teams will contact you. Careers and employability. So some of the questions we get asked is, can I work and study? Kind of quick answer is yes. And then the backup is that there are limitations. So as a student on a student visa, you can only work 20 hours per week, part-time outside of your studies. It's taken very seriously. We have touch points with the programs. We have to know a student is attending, so we do attendance monitoring. So if you're missing class to work, you soon get caught out, but it is doable. You can do placements and internships during your course as well, and some are paid or non-paid. They can be additional years of study or something you do over a summer and gain credits. So there's definitely flexibility to add things into your program without adding too much time or effort onto the length of the program. And the other good thing about working in the UK is we've brought back the post-study work visa. So now students have the opportunity to stay up to 2 years after their studies, living and working in the UK. So that's a lot easier for the students to move on. So the difference kind of between the placements and internships, obviously they're slightly longer, 4 to 6 months. You could be working on a big commercial project. You may have salaries attached to those placements, anything between 14 and 25,000. They can be in the UK or they can be overseas. You can get lots of valuable experience. The idea you're adding more strings to your bow of your studies. It can also be part of an assessment. So a really good example is I actually did a year out. I did an industrial work placement and I was paid to do that. And I was able to work full time for a year, write up an assignment that actually gave me 40 credits of 120 credits that I needed to make up that year. And I won't go into too much detail about credits because it gets confusing. But that was a big chunk of my final year and allowed me to really kind of know if it was the career I wanted to go into or what other things I could be doing as part of my degree. And I'll be honest, I did a recreation and leisure management degree. So it was a very different type of degree back then in the 90s when I started it. And, you know, I'd learned a lot from the industry and I got involved in a lot of different things whilst on that placement. So I'm always very grateful for what opportunities I had. But again, those things are possible. It can never be more than 50% of the total time you're spending here. So the idea, again, this is related to visas. So we always try to say anything over a year, a little bit crazy, you're overextending your time, but that you don't necessarily have to add a year to your study and do a placement that way. You can do things part-time or over the summer that kind of contribute to your program and things. We allow students to do about 20 credits, I believe it is. So in the second year, they're encouraged to do this kind of work experience and gain credits for writing up the project.
There's also a lot of opportunities outside of the academic structure. So if you just want to do some work shadowing or just some general work experience, the university or your department can help set that up. Granted, mine were at graduate level, but I spent a fair bit of time in archives looking at medieval manuscripts and things like that with archivists. And then for my PhD, I was working on film sets and I was working with game designers and working with authors. So really had that hands-on experience, which is what Wales is quite well known for. You graduate with experience. So I graduated with IMDb credits and 3 job offers from 2 different industries, education and film. So just having access to that network and that experience was really invaluable to me.
Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so I touched on very briefly the graduate immigration route. That has changed and it was first announced back in 2019. So I don't know where the last year or so has gone. It's gone in a flash, but we're now at the point where students will be graduating and able to benefit from the post-study work visa. Again, it's available to all international students who complete a degree level program or above. So they're bachelor's, master's, and that they hold a student visa to study here. all successful students will receive 2 years non-extendable leave. So it does mean that they can pretty much, as long as they meet the criteria, stay and work in the UK for a couple of years. And for some students, that means they can actually pay back a lot of their debts with loans and things like that. There's not been too much information since January, and we're still trying to get more information. But one thing we're good at here is making everything available on our university websites. And, you know, we have careers services, we have various departments within international that will share information with our students as they go into graduation, and, you know, try and guide them as much as we can so that during their time they're studying with us, we're giving them as many tools as possible to try and benefit from working in the UK before heading home. And this is everybody else.
And these are universities and our people. So I'll leave this up for a minute if you want to jot anything down, but I'm also happy to share this presentation with you. So obviously, like I said, this will be up on YouTube. If you've registered for this session, I have your contact details and I'm happy to send this to you if you'd like. But yeah, so I hope that just kind of gives you a general overview. I know it's a lot of information, and that's probably the longest we've gone for this series of webinar sessions, just because we want to make sure we cover the big things that we get asked all the time. But I definitely want to push it to you guys. So do have a think. If you have any questions, we'll open it up in a moment. But if you're watching this on YouTube, please do reach out to us. If you do have further questions, we're always very happy to help. And this is really just scraping the iceberg. But the main thing I want you all to know is that this is very doable. This is transferable. This is affordable. It's really pretty. It's a lovely place to live. And you have a whole team of people that are here to help support you in the application process and make your application as strong as it can be, and make sure that it's going to be well considered for a Welsh university. And then once accepted, we'll help you with everything else. So like I said, if you like the program and you like the uni and the location, apply. Once accepted, we'll help you with housing, visas, travel, all that other stuff. So just try to focus in on the program and the location. And if you like those things, drop us a line.